Hi everyone, I'm Tom Hammerberg. I'm Tom Hammerberg, and my father was Staff Sergeant Robert E. Hammerberg. My sister and brother are here today also. And I'm talking about photographers. He was with the group of combat photographers for the 322nd Knives Annihilators. And there were probably 6 of them who flew with the plane. I don't know how many of you got to go on that plane yesterday, but I sat on the seat that he's sitting on in this photograph, and I didn't have the gun belts hanging around me or any of the other equipment, but man, was it a tight fit. And so there was, he could shoot photos out of the side windows where the machine guns were, or he could shoot out the bottom of the floor right here if he lifted up the floor panels and opened it up for an aerial photography, for an aerial shot down. The other place that he shot photographs, I worked out with Ron Balesta, and it was the celestial opening that was above the navigator's head. And he could, if the plane was on the ground taxiing, he could stick his head and camera out, shoot a photograph either direction. So this is him. I have actually the same hairline that he eventually ended up with. I always look at this photo and I'm just like, he's such a handsome guy. And the thing that that none of us kids knew was that during the war his nickname was Hank.
What?
Was Hank. And we don't know where that came from, but all the envelopes are labeled Hank, private, do not touch. So he, a little background, he enlisted in March of 1942 in Des Moines after trying a couple times in Chicago and maybe Peoria or one other area. He tried several times to enlist, and they turned him down every time because he had asthma. And he wore glasses, and one of the doctors, maybe in Chicago or one of the other places, said, you know, if you take up smoking, it'll get rid of your asthma. And yeah, he got rid of his asthma, but it was a lifelong habit that killed him in the end. So in some of these photographs, you'll see cigarette in hand, he's in the photograph. So he enlisted he ended up going to Fort Des Moines. It was his last chance. After that, he was going to go to Canada, and they took him in Fort Des Moines, Iowa. And then he was in training in Georgia in the swamps, and he decided with the infantry, an officer came around to ask for volunteers, and the officer wouldn't say what he was volunteering for, but my dad said, anything has got to be better than this. And he volunteered, and he ended up being trained as an aerial photographer for the Air Force. And I think it's kind of interesting because, but a little bit, that'll come in a second, but he was transferred on October 12, 1942 to the 322nd Bomb Group from a training group. And he was transferred with four other guys from the photography group. And so then they worked together the rest of the war. Then he was in the first group to ship out for England. They shipped out on November 24th aboard the Queen Elizabeth. The one story we have from that trip is that he learned how to gamble on the Mississippi River. He was originally from Moline, Illinois, so we lived on the Mississippi River, and he worked on the tugboats that moved barges up and down the river, and they used to gamble at night. And so He was a gambler. December 1st, they arrive at Bury St. Edmunds in England, the Rosham area, and at that point, he's with the 322nd Bomb Group, the 3rd Bombardment Wing, and the 8th Air Force. A little bit about the collection. When I first started working with them, I thought there was 200 to 300. And then so right before this presentation, I thought, well, maybe I'll just count these. So I knew I was wrong when in the scrapbook there were 143 photos. And then in book 1, which was the loose images I started putting together, there was 100. In book 2, there was 240. In book 3, there was 122, plus some photographs that my grandmother sent him from home. In book 4, which is the newspaper clippings that my grandmother kept, there were 6 images that the newspapers had gotten from the Air Force, that they had published the pictures in the paper and then sent the original photograph to my grandmother. And you'll see some of those in here. And then we had one envelope left, and it has 28 loose images, and then various envelopes of bombing missions that he went on, where he kept some record of what the mission was in and where the bombs fell. And in several of those envelopes, I found pictures of airplanes. And you'll understand in a minute why I was finding airplanes. So there ended up being a little over 700 photographs in his collection. When others have been describing their box that they got from the attic or from the storeroom. When I was a kid, in the basement of our house, up on a shelf, there was a photo enlarger. And even as a kid, I kind of knew what that was, just because my dad was into photographs. And so there was a photo enlarger, and next to the photo enlarger was all the developing trays and tongs, and and those, we had those for years in our house. And then next to it was a box, and as a curious kid, I opened the box, and in it was a bunch of these things. And there were film canisters in there that say Hank Private, keep out. There was a flying logbook. There were linen maps of Europe. There were 2 scrapbooks, one here and one here. And the first scrapbook I'll describe is one that he started in 1936. It went through 1938, and I figured out in my head that his age, he was born in 1920, so in 1942 he would have been 22. So in 1936 he was 16. And so from the time he was 16 to 18, he collected articles from the newspaper, glued them in a scrapbook, and kept them. And after looking at it a couple times, it was divided into 3 sections. The first section was military aircraft from 1936 to 38. I put this up here because I think these are Hawker Hurricanes, and they were one of my favorites growing up. This picture is in here because this is Glenn L. Martin, and it was, think about how coincidental things are. He's having recreated a flight he had done in 1912, and this was in 1936. And then, so it just seemed coincidental to me that Glenn Martin ended up in one of his scrapbooks, and he ended up flying his airplanes, or flying with his pilots in his airplanes. So this was his World War II scrapbook. And this, you'll see, oops, you'll see this picture a little later on, and I'll show you more about that. But he spent the first more than half of the book is actually a few things like this, where he's cleaning flight equipment here, so one of the other photographers took his picture. Here they are hanging out, and you can ID most of these guys sitting here, and they're all in the photograph. I always think this is interesting because my sister told me about the crews revolted when they were being sent to France because the higher-ups told them they couldn't take their pets with them. They couldn't take their cats and dogs with them. And they revolted, and the higher-ups relented. And to me, this was their thing that kept PTSD at bay. You know, you'll see in several of these photographs are dogs. Let's see. This is, I think, latrine duty. This is, my dad described pulling guard duty in France and Belgium in the wintertime. This is the bishop's house, which is adjacent to the Beauvais Cathedral in France. And this is the USO in Paris, I believe. This is the church that was right next to the base. Actually, the church in Great Salem. So this, I call this part of the story Blackbait, Roberta Falconberry, Ron Balesta, and the Duchess of Barksdale. And that is because my dad in his scrapbook has a picture of blackbait. And he didn't label it as blackbait. There's nothing on there. It's just that you'll recognize it if you ever go to the Smithsonian Institute. So my journey started with the blackbait photo. This, Ron helped me with this. He recommended that I scan things at least 2400 DPI. This one, I think I scanned at 6000 because I just wanted to be able to enlarge it. So it's the matching image from, so he has an original copy. So all these years, we three kids had thought that he had shot that photograph because it was in his scrapbook. But we're not so certain now because Ron can't find any evidence of my dad being on the flight, but he can find one of the other photographers who was on the flight listed in the flight records. So we'll get to that in a minute. But the other famous photograph that people find online is what I believe is called the 5 Flying Photographers. This is James C. Hinkle. This is Wilbur de Groff. This is Frank Udovic. This is Charles Smith, and this is my father, Robert Hammerberg. It was shot by Frank Herschel of Life magazine somewhere around January 10th, a little before January 10th, I want to say, because it ran in the newspapers on January 10th. And all these and they would send it, they sent it to all 5 of these guys' hometowns. And so I have, well, I'll go to the next
When you
couple.
said all 5 of the guys are what?
Sorry?
You said all 5 of the guys what?
They sent this photograph to all 5 guys' local newspapers. And so I have prints from the Moline Daily Dispatch with this picture in there, and then it's got the citation underneath it. So what they sent out was this with the picture. And that's actually, you probably all saw that's Pappy's pram. And I figured the photographer picked that one because it's a really interesting image on the side of the plane. So there were many versions of this. So Frank's Scherschel shot many versions of this. This one ran. This one ran in a Peoria, Illinois newspaper, and the editor then sent it up to my grandmother in Moline. This one is fairly famous, so this would be Hinkle, Hammerberg, Udebeck, Smith, and DeGraw. And then in my dad's collection were two of these. I speculate that my dad is the one setting up the photo here, because he's the only one who's not posed, and he's the only one with a cigarette in his hand. and this is a dog right here. So the 6 photographers that Ron and I have figured out are Wilbur DeGraw, right here, Hinkle, James C. Hinkle here, Charles Smith, Orville Burton, my dad, and Frank Udebeck. And then, but we've been able, that my dad labeled the whole photo, but ended up missing one of the guys. So I could figure this was the captain, and I knew who Charles Smith was. So one of these 2 guys, and I'm figuring it's this guy because he's wearing more of a sergeant's uniform, is the unnamed soldier. So if you recognize him, please let me know. This was the photo group. Now, if you look, I don't know how well you can see it, but this is made up of a series of 4 different images or 5 different images per letter that were then, this is an actual photo image of a collage that the photo group put together. And go back one, you'll see this guy, Leland Hogue, and this guy, Sergeant Unknown, posing by the waist gunner, machine gun, and right over here, there's Leland Hogue. Here's the 3 of them walking together, and then you start to see, where is it? Here's the 5 flying photographers' pictures. You see each of the stages of the developing of the prints and everything. I thought there was a picture on here of them managing the cameras, but I don't think so. Here they are gathered around analyzing photographs. So then they actually, what is in this archive are mission briefings. This is the 3rd mission that they flew after the 2 disastrous missions. So this would be in July of '43. It's Triggerville. Aerial photographs, portraits, planes, of course. Aircraft damage is a big composite of the photographs. Aircraft in flight is a big one. Aircraft parked at their hard stands. This is mild and bitter right here. This is flak happy right here. And this tail is from just the tool. This is, and then aircraft taxiing to take off. Base formal occasions. This is the change of station at station 485. This is Colonel Nye taking control of the station from the British. These are the men in the background changing the flag. Christmas party at the Officers Club. I found another version of that online by someone. There were two of these. And then aerial base photography. He would shoot photos of the base coming back in. So this is Andrews Field. This is either hangar number 1 or hangar number 2. I don't know which is which. And then base photography from on the ground. And this is, you'll see later, this is an image of the gliders being towed up for D-Day.
That's the CG-4.
The CG-4?
Cargo Glider 4.
Okay. You take that down?
I flew
Thanks, Sheriff. What's that?
I flew
You
those.
flew those?
I was a glider pilot for a little while,
Okay.
until I washed up.
A CG-4. All right.
Yeah, CG-4.
So then I threw this one in there for Ron because this is mild and bitter right here, and this is mild and bitter. This plane was too far away to get a number on it, but the mission, it came from the mission photographs, and it was Muratis Aerodrome, January 7th, 1944. And I estimated 50th mission, but I haven't taken the time to actually count. This is the famous picture of Mild and Bitter. I think my dad shot it, and I'm not used to his pictures being out of focus, but it is. I've got it listed wrong as 50th mission. It's actually the 100th mission. And it's, yes, there's a lot of flack in. There's actually flack in a lot of these photos. This is the other famous picture that's online. This one right here. It's Fighting Cock is the plane, and the navigator bombardier is smoking in the front section. But if you look at the frame, this one is from my dad's collection. If you look at the picture, his hand is down here next to the side. So it's a frame earlier or a frame later than this one. And then my dad covered the crash of Fighting Cock when it took out the control tower at Andrews Field. And this, let's see, this is where the nose of the plane would have been. There's the wing. This is Ginger 2, and it was, I'm butchering these German names, Niederschule Railroad Bridge on 14th of March, 1945. So it was one of the last missions of the war. This was Ginger 2. It was Colonel Nye's second plane of Nye's Annihilators, but he had already been transferred in late 1944 back to the States for a different posting. This plane up here is Hank's Yanks, which was also in the unit, and this is where I've been telling Ron, my dad flew with all the units, not just the 452nd. He flew most of his missions with the 452nd. But the PNs are the 449th, so they may have mixed the planes on the mission. Is also a possibility. And then you all see the bomb. This is Satan's sister. I don't know the mission, and it's unknown. Sometimes you can find it online. But the flak is going off all around them. All of these are in his collection. This is Little Joe 2. This one is online. I think it was in Captain Joseph Mahar's collection at the Air Force Archive. But my dad did fly in Little Joe 2 once. And then Ron and I have been counting missions and ducks and so forth on the planes. This is Hotel Gremlin, and there are 3 images that my dad had in the archive of this plane. And the thing that has me confused is that it's Hotel Gremlin, but yet over here you have a stork with a baby hanging from the beak. And so it's kind of an odd combination. This is one of my favorites. I have no idea what plane it is, but I do know it's over water. And speculating it's the English Channel. And that had to be taken from the Bombay, or from his aerial photo door. This is Little Pork Chop, Little Poke Chop. And it is part of the SS's, which is 451st. Right? I'll ask for some help. I can't remember right now, but it's also a pretty online photograph. And then Tondaleo is another online photograph. We have a print of this and 3 negatives of a set from this one. I threw in the Mustang here. I think it's a Mustang. Is that right?
Yes,
Yeah. So this would have been one of the fighter planes escorting them. And then the parking collection. You saw this earlier. The Mild and Bitter and Black Happy. This is taxiing out to the runoff. This plane right here is Jezebel. My dad flew in that one. At least one mission. Should I go back here?
What base is this?
This is Andrews Field,
Andrews?
Great Sailing.
Oh.
In Essex. It was 4 miles from Braintree and about a mile from Rain. I just wanted to say, my dad flew, flew 4 different missions at this point, and then I think 4 different missions in this plane that shows the tail. And so Just a Tool was another one that he flew in quite often. And so one of the things is you can read the numbers all the way down.
Now, as a photographer, was he required to fly certain missions?
Yes, they would tell them the missions that they wanted him to fly. And that's the other story. He describes walking into the flight room, or the flight briefing room, and the pilots would all groan because they only sent the live photographers on the worst mission. It is one of those, oh no, you again. But after, I don't know, probably after he got past the 13th mission, they were like, but it's Hammberberg, he'll bring us home. And because he got the reputation of always coming back. So. This is where I jump into the next piece. Roberta, this is why I was, over lunch, I was commenting on Frank Riesebeck. My dad flew the first 5 practice runs that he did in England for his photo practice. with Captain Frank Riesebeck. Frank Riesebeck flew the first mission May 14th in this plane, Cherokee, not Cherokee, sorry, Chickasaw Chief. And we have 1 or 2 negatives of Chickasaw Chief in the collection. And the only way I was able to tell it was Chickasaw Chief was by the tail number. So this was, and he labeled the back of this picture 16th of May 1943. On the 17th of May 1943, the plane was shot down at on the second mission when they lost 11 planes. It was one of the 11. But however, on the 14th of May, Frank Riesebeck was flying the plane, and he had, as an observer on the plane, he had Francis M. Brady, the commanding general of 3rd Bomb Wing. And I just think back, over Imogen, Holland, it was shot down a mission later, and the day after this, my dad shot this picture. The irony here is, in his scrapbook, he calls out first briefing, and in history, Ron and Roberta sent me the history of the 322nd, and in the history, it names all these guys here. But the only 2 I can physically identify right now, because I have their pictures, is Captain Sauer and Lieutenant Past, who was the group navigator for the 322nd. And then Sauer here was the intelligence head. And then, Stan, this is a question for you, actually. They are standing around a sand table here.
Yeah, I see.
Where they sculpted the bomb area.
Could be.
Did your kids use those?
I
sand
was
tables?
never involved in the sand table.
Okay.
So.
I was just curious, because I don't think any of them ever survived the war, but it's like they talk about it in the history. So then you get a couple days more into the archive and into his scrapbook here, and here they're moving to France. So this is they're bugging out. He loves flying up in the clouds, and then he labeled this one a summer day. But this one is, he labels briefing again, and it's the first mission briefing since the disaster on May 17th. Then I didn't include many of these in here, but he was an avid landscape photographer. And as a landscape architect, I appreciate that. This was the air raid bomb shelter at Bovington Camp. I just always knew it as Bovington. This was a thunderbolt at home, he called it, at sundown. And so this is Andrews Field. This is what I was telling you, Ron. I had these pictures that were part. So this one actually covers a little bit more ground around the outside edge, but I just thought it should blow it up a little bit early. I think it's circa early 1943 or middle 1943. The taxi runs are here. Runways here and here and here. And then hard stands. The hangar you saw in that earlier picture is right here. There was a second hangar up here. Headquarters was right here for the 322nd. The photo group was based right in here, in this grouping. And then this was all living quarters over here. And then this dark patch through the middle here is great sailing. So this is more of it from the air. This is great. These are some of the old houses and manors in great sailing. Once again, great sailing. This is the bomb depot. Just here you can see the hard stands, one of the hangars, and the bomb depot. A little bit closer, you can see the various innocent shelters, the hangar, and so forth. And then I know that you're expecting this. There's only a handful of these that I'm putting in here. There's so many more in the collection, but these were crystal clear and they were part of his scrapbook. So this is D-Day. I do not know which beach it is. D-Day again.
So that must have been several days after D-Day because they were able to scrape out a landing strip.
Oh, yes.
Right.
Actually, these are all labeled June 6th. And then he put together a panorama, and you can see the matching areas that he dodged in using the photo pieces. And there's 2 copies of this, which is it's just amazing to me. So they took, after D-Day, they played around with their photo skills. And then, like I was talking before, CG4?
CG4.
CG4, oh, we
Yeah.
got it. I have one other one of these where the planes are in the air. And then the planes with the stripes on it here on D-Day. The other thing, like I was talking about earlier, is they shot the USO shows. And, so all of you, I think, know who this guy is. And then Francis Langford is standing by its side here. And then they held it inside the hangar, so it's a bit dark in this photo, but you can see all the men crammed in. This is Bob Hope from the show itself. And then James Cagney came through. The other thing I wanted to mention is my dad got the date wrong when he was putting his scrapbook together. Bob Hope was in the Pacific in 1944. He was in England in 1943. So I did a little bit of research because I actually wanted to know. So I don't know any information on James Cagney's visit, with the exception that he was shooting portraits of them out in the base. And then when he was restationed in Germany at the end of the war for the disarmament, he got to see Bob Hope again at Fritzlar, Germany. And there are, according to the website, there are tons of photographs taken at this show. And part of it is, if you look closely, the reason why there's so many photographs, if you look closely, there's camera. So there were all these different cameramen there taking pictures for the show. And the most of the photographs from here are pretty recognizable because of the soldiers on the roof back here of the buildings. So this is Gail Robbins. She isn't familiar to me, but I am sure she was very familiar with the servicemen, very familiar to the servicemen back then, singer and actor. This is Ruth Dennis, an accordion player. This is Jerry Colonna, who traveled with Bob Hope quite often, comedian, entertainer. And Patty Thomas was almost always on the troops. She was a dancer. And then here they are all together, getting ready to sing a song and either talking with the orchestra or waving to the guys behind them. Here they are doing a song under the direction of Bob Hope, and this is in order Jack Pepper, who's an actor and comedian, June Brenner, a musician, Gail Robbins is in between there, Ruth Dennis, Patty Thomas, Roger Price, who was a soldier and a comedian, right here, and then Jerry Colonna on the end. And then I just thought you might want to see the expanse and the numbers of soldiers who were here. And then shortly after the show ended, as the story goes, a group of servicemen walked in, having walked 5 miles to see this show. And so Bob Hope had them come out front, and he did the show all over again for them.
Wow.
So I'm on to portraits now, and this is one of the huge reasons why I'm doing this is Brigadier General Francis M. Brady. He was the one who rode on that first mission as an observer. Everybody seemed surprised, at least I was, when I found out the generals and the colonels all were in the planes along with the...
I had a couple of generals fly with me.
They did? Yeah. So it was part of the, I guess, esprit corps that they would fly as observers, so they knew what the guys were going through.
And
So
usually always,
I wondered that. I wondered if Francis Brady thought it was a milk run, because I don't think it was. When I read the reports from May 14th.
of course, even on some milk runs we had flag, but
Yeah,
usually milk runs.
yeah.
But notice you don't have any pictures of this guy when he was flying, because
No.
he flew on the top mission.
Right. He flew on, yes, but he flew on, my dad never flew on those first couple missions, and I don't think any photographers actually went on those first 2 missions, and I don't quite know why. I would have thought they would have wanted somebody, but as my brother pointed out, had our dad flown on the 17th of May, we wouldn't all be here presenting these pictures. So this is, I think, early 1943 is my guess, because General Brady was transferred out at some point, and then this gentleman, Major General Samuel E. Anderson, became the commanding officer of the 3rd Wing.
Yeah, he was our commander, 9th Air Force.
Yes, 9th Air Force. He was the head honcho for all the 9th Air Force all the way through the war.
Yeah.
And the thing here is on the back of this, my dad wrote Colonel Anderson, and then in parentheses behind it, now a general. So when he was doing his scrapbook, so I think, I wouldn't know any better, but I think you probably could look at what's on the shoulders and figure out.
I don't see a star.
Mhm. And then this is Colonel Glenn Carlisle Nye, commanding officer of the 322nd Bombardment Group. And He was the reason why they started calling themselves the Knives Annihilators. He flew quite often with the men, and he didn't pick and choose between easy and hard. I've noticed he was on some of the hardest ones. So he always flew in a plane called Ginger. But Ginger got shot down when somebody else was flying it earlier in the war, so he got a new plane and they named it Ginger too. And his first wife's name was Virginia, so it was named after his wife. This is the only two photographs I have of the officers, and they are at a farewell dinner for Colonel Nye, who is seated right here, after he'd been transferred back to the States. And my dad was able to label each one of these guys. At the time, this guy right here was the CO of the 452nd. That's Colonel Worston, Colonel Irwin Worston. But then the reason why I called out this is, by this time, this is Major Sauer, and this is Major Past. And Past is in several images, Life magazine color images, with Colonel Nye. So the two of them flew together. This one, some of you will recognize. I don't.
Oh, it's Monty.
Yeah. So Monty visited the base, and my dad photographed it.
Prima donna.
Right. And well, the other one was, he was such a conservative tank commander that Patton used to complain about it. You'll notice in the photograph here, if you look really closely, there's a beret up here on top, and there's a likeness on this piece of paper, and he's signing it. Down here, he's admiring or looking at it, or deciding he likes or doesn't like it, and this is the artist who drew it and offering him the pen to sign it. And I think it's one of those caricature sketches that you can get of yourself in some of the famous cities. But I thought this was really very interesting, that like my dad's an artist taking a photograph of an artist and a general here. So these are three of the images, portrait images. This is Captain Short. He was eventually became a major and was the last commanding officer of the 452nd. Captain Bridges, he flew with once, and then Bernadine Forrest, the bomb squadron adjutant. Roberta, they appear. This guy, I had no idea who he was until I saw him in your history of Knives Annihilators. These are two people my dad flew with. So this is what happened was, I had the blackbait photo. I found in an article in the Smithsonian, Roberta Blankenberry's name. So I called her in the Historical Society, and she sent me to Ron Valesta, who then started helping me through with all of this. And so one of the first things Ron wanted to know was, what planes do you have pictures of? So thus the planes I lead with. But then he sent me some of the mission information from my own father. And from that information, I got a pilot, I got a co-pilot. You know, Ron actually showed some of that information up there, and I got a pilot, co-pilot, navigator, bombardier, engineer gunner, turret gun, tail gunner. And so my dad's logbook listed pilot and plane. So my first interest was, could I find pictures of every plane that he flew in? But my second interest was, can I find pictures of the pilots, because he had labeled some of them. And so, as here you have First Lieutenant Amundsen. He flew 4 times with him, one of those planes was Little Joe 2. And then Hendricks was the tail gunner, or sorry, engineer gunner and turret gunner for Amundsen. This is Lieutenant Levinsky. And where I got this information from was the awards records of the 352nd sent to me by Roberta and Ron. And so Pat Jones was the navigator for Levinsky. By then, they were, he was a tech sergeant. They were allowing sergeants to be navigator bombers. These 2 guys, between the 2 of them, he flew 4 missions with them. This is Lieutenant Peters and Lieutenant Graham. And he flew in Just a Tool twice with Lieutenant Graham. And he flew in Pisapis with Lieutenant Peters. And then he flew with these 3 guys with I think, and I don't know which plane they were in with him, but I know that he flew with these guys because he named each one of them. This was on the back. All this said was Carrot Top Gherkin. This is Vince Rayrat, and then Bob Worth on the back, on the back of the photo it said Bob Worth. There were very few of these guys who gave their first name to. These guys had names on them, and through the information that I got from them, I was able to put some initials to the names. The story of Cook right here is one of the early 322nd stories. It was on the first mission, May 14th. It was Colonel Cello's plane had been shot up, and they found out when they got back to base that the hydraulics weren't working, the electricity wasn't working, and so Cook, picture this, after you looked at that plane yesterday, open bomb bay doors, he's hanging on the catwalk, holding on to the hydraulic tubes to get enough hydraulic fluid into the tank so that they can put the wheels down. And the co-pilot's back there helping him. But I couldn't, yesterday I'm on that catwalk thinking about him being over that. And he got the air medal for that. And so my dad took the portrait for his air medal. Later on in the war, the coincidence here is that later on in the war, he was flying with Frank Riesebeck, Captain Frank Riesebeck, when they were shot down. And then, so he was killed in action. Some of these I'm not sure about too, but I was able to get initials for them. There were 2 or 3 different Wilsons in the grouping, but I know he was a navigator bombardier, or a navigator at least. Lieutenant Ward, you see him mentioned in all the archive information. Lieutenant Allen. And then this gentleman, I had no idea who he was until I scanned the image and then zoomed in on it, and it says G.M. Allen, Lieutenant G.M. Allen on his May West right there. Several more, Lieutenant Mendelbaum, Lieutenant Inman with the 451st. I have a feeling my dad flew with these guys. but I just don't know what plane. Overby appears in 3 or 4 different photos. OC, it said cadet training behind it. I have no idea what that means, but I was able to find the person who it was. PW Steel looks like somebody you'd like to hang out with. And this was Smokey Trainer. He was in the archive that or the book that Roberta showed me. A.C. Swain appears in the logs as the pilot for a lot of flights, and so he was able to name all these people, and I was able to through the background put initials with them. Some of them he listed as home, but on the official records I got from Ron, this guy is listed under the Missing in Action group, so I'm not quite sure where the discrepancy is. I have a feeling that Lieutenant Clark flew on Mild and Bitter several times. I mean, the other thing, the places they pose to indicate what they were, for the most part. Like this is the engineer gunner, tail gunner. And these are, these are almost all of these are distinguished flying cross photos, portraits that were taken and probably shipped to their hometown newspapers. So these are all men that are unknown to me. Unfortunately, when they archived them, they wrote the information across the top here. You can kind of see it on the tail up there. And so I know very little about some of these guys, except for the position on the plane that they were. More unknowns, some pilots, navigators, gunners. And so my question for any of you is, or do you know someone who might be able to recognize some of these men? And then the last thing is my email. Pretend on that email, my kids gave me that email. So free too easy is on the flip side, it very rarely gets hacked.
Be interesting to put a few of those on our website, our
Yes,
Facebook,
yeah.
every week or two, just to see maybe somebody may get it.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, something like that.
You gave me with 2 E's, free. That has 1. Try to do it.
Oh, you know something? I get it wrong quite often. So
You know which one's right?
I can find out.
Oh yeah, and then 3 E's on Wheezy.
The writing you were referring to that was in the white part, which you couldn't see, there's a lot of them that have writing across the bottom. Have you
Yes.
deciphered that?
Oh, yes. So this is this one's pretty clear right here.
Yeah. Have you
So
deciphered that?
So this first part right here to here is in parentheses, and that's the station.
That's the what?
That's the station. Their base.
Their base.
That's the station and base. And then the next one here in this parentheses is the date the photo was taken. So this was May 3rd, 1944. And then the third thing in parentheses, it either says DCF men, or it says DCF, or sorry, not DC, DFC men, or DFC, or it can say combat
So these were pictures that were for awards?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Can you go back to that one with the parachute harness?
One more?
No, the one with, there, that one, down
Yeah.
there with the circle.
Yeah.
That's the British webbing for a parachute for the chest chute. And that's the one that I wore. And that circle in the middle of your belly, you all you have to do is hit that and is turn it and then hit it, and then all the straps will release you. So that's one of the, it was very handy parachute rig to wear with my chest pack. So I would drive in the, in the
Okay.
nose of the plane. And my parachute was back on my navigation table, a
Okay.
chest chute. You
Okay.
know, in case I had to bail out, I had to climb over the co-pilot and grab my parachute and hook it up. Anyway,
Okay.
what was that type of a harness? It was very convenient for disengaging that circle.
So that was a British design?
The British design, yes.
Cool. That's very cool. So he's wearing one. He's wearing one. Actually, he's wearing one, right?
Yeah, it looks like it, yeah.
I didn't think anything of it at the time. It was convenient, but you know, I flew missions up in the nose of that plane without a parachute.
I'm like,
And
Fred, I was like.
I knew that my parachute was waiting for me on the navigation table.
However, as you were going down,
It really-
the parachute was floating away.
Well, that's how I was like,
Pretty dumb things you do
when you're 20, yes.
Was it hard to wear? All the photos you got, do you have any target stripes?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's what I have. That
Oh,
would be,
yes.
if you
There
would
was no
get,
room.
have the target stripe.
Yes, I do have a lot of those.
Yeah, that's what I have too.
And actually, my dad kept each one in individual envelopes.
And that's when you can see the precision bombing of our 26s.
Yeah. No, I have quite a bit of that.
Yeah.
Before your dad was tapped to go into this area, was he into photography, or did he have any
Not that we
interest
know
in it?
of.
But because he turned out to be such a great eye.
And when he got back, he actually did think about becoming a professional.
Oh, he didn't stay into that?
No, well, he, I don't know, he was a private personal photographer for our whole family for the rest of his life, and took beautiful photographs, but he evaluated how much a professional photographer made at the time, and he was, at the time, he was considered a draftsman for Deere and Company, John Deere and Company. And he eventually became a licensed electrical engineer through John Deere and Company. And he just figured he could make a lot more money to support a family on with Deere and Company as opposed to being a,
Well, he left you a great legacy on this.
yeah, and that's what it is amazing to me. Like just, it was amazing to us three kids how just beautiful, like a lot of these photographs are, how crystal clear they are and so forth.
Those little tiny holes. Was there a photographer assigned to each bomb group, or just?
Yes, so, it's way back at the beginning, but there were two. So Frank Udovic and my dad were 452nd. Orville Burton was 449th. Let's see. Hinkle and, Smith, actually Smith, I think by the end of the war, Charles Smith was with the 449th, but he started out with like the 450th or something. But, it's gonna take me a little bit to get back there. So, Wilbur DeGroff was 451st. James Hinkle was 450th. Charles Smith was 451st. But I saw by the end of the war he was discharged with Orville Burton's group, the 449th. And then my dad and Frank Udovec were 452nd. And that's where I was saying we suspect that Hove may have been another photographer with the squadrons, but they were each assigned a squadron. Although if you go to the Air Museum, the American Air Museum in Britain, they list my dad as headquarters unit. And so I think they were under the command of the headquarters unit, but yet they served in each of the squadrons. So like the awards, when you go to look up the awards, you find Udovec and my dad under the 452nd. You find Orville Burton under the 449th. And you find the other awards for the other three under the 451st and 450th.
Those are the bomb squadrons within which bomb group?
Yes.
322nd.
Yes.
322nd.
So my
322nd.
question is,
Yes.
did each bomb group have a photographer?
Yes, they
assigned?
did. Yes, they did. I have to say yes, at least as far as I know, they did.
But this is a squadron breakdown here, this is.
Yes. Yes. So by all rights, there should be hundreds and hundreds of more photographs floating around out there. But just a little bit of research that Ron and I have been doing is, Orville Burton, this is the personal story. Orville Burton died in Rock Island, Illinois, which is right next to Moline, Illinois. And none of us kids were aware that my dad even knew he was living with them. And so the only ones that he kept in touch with yearly were Frank Udovec, Victor Fleissing, and a little bit with Victor Rousseau. And I don't know why he didn't keep in touch with them.
Anything else?
Every portrait photo that I see of these men seems to be just really nice. Is there some secret to?
My kids' comments to me, because they're all taking photography classes, they're all interested. They go, my son Charlie goes, did the Army train them on a third, and a third? Because that's the artistic, a third. So like if you, like artistically,
It's the composition formula.
the composition formula is a third, and a third, and in thirds. And so it's not always a true formula, but, you know, it's a third.
And that still applies to a portrait?
Yes, yeah. So,
Try not to center your subject.
try not to say yes. Well, the other thing is my dad had these, instead of taking, I don't know why, I don't know why Ferdinand E. Forrest decided to take a mugshot photo. But you'll see that these other two are slightly turned.
Uh-huh.
Bit of smile.
Yeah,
And
that's
they
probably the
have-
only one I've seen.
They usually have a smile, and the shoulders are at about a third, eyes are at about a third. If you go back to these two guys, they are actually posed at their desk. which actually makes a really nice composition, you know, pen in hand, and paper in front of him. So in the United States flag in the background. This one I really like. There's a different one that's online of Colonel Anderson, or General Anderson. But I like this one because of the informality of the cigarette in his hand, in his pocket. And so I suspect my dad was posing them a little bit.
Yeah.
General Anderson came and flew a mission with us when we were in France. He would do that periodically. He did it once with us.
That's right. So you guys all met him?
Just
You all met him?
The generals
public
always,
relations on his part. No, I mean,
Yeah.
it was sincere.
Yes.
It was always good to have him at the briefing and then have him fly with us. And it wasn't a milk run either. So he got shot at, just like all of us.
Yeah. Well, and that's what, when I was reading the reports back from the May 14th mission with General Brady, those planes were just completely shot up with flak.
the generals always pick the top crews to fly with. And so far as the flak is concerned, in the B-26 at the end of the war, all missions had flak. But depends on how active the Germans were as to where the flak was coming.
Colonel Coyner, our group commander, flew the first 5 missions with us. He was not above getting in there like the rest of us.
Well, and Colonel Stillman was the commanding officer, was on the second mission with them and was shot down. So, and I think that might be when Anderson.
Our colonel, incidentally, later in his career became a 2-star general.
Yeah, that's what always amazes me is a lot of these guys stayed in the military. My dad was, I think, eager to move on.
All right, thank you for Thomas. We have one more presentation for the afternoon.